everybody, Melissa Triebwasser here for Frogs Today, back with From the Other Sideline, a very special edition as we get ready for the 12-0, number 3 ranked TCU Horned Frogs to take on a top 10 team in Kansas State in order to preview this important matchup that not only has Big 12 title implications, but national and playoff implications as well. I'm joined by a very special guest, a senior writer for The Athletic, Max Olson, one of the foremost authorities in college football. Max, thanks so much for taking some time to jump on with us today.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me on, Melissa.
Yeah, you bet. So listen, I wanted to talk to you. This is the second time that TCU and Kansas State have played, but obviously so much more on the line and a very different Kansas State team coming in to face the Horned Frogs in Arlington, a team that has managed to work their way into the top 10 of the penultimate playoff rankings. What have you seen with the growth of the Wildcats since Will Howard has really kind of taken ownership of the quarterback position?
Yeah, it's been really impressive. You know, I thought going into the season, I really like Kansas State as kind of that team that could be the dark horse team to make it to the Big 12 title game. And I think that kind of became a popular sentiment in August, and then they weren't really the dark horse anymore. But, you know, I think that from talking to Chris Kleiman and his coaching staff this summer, they really felt like this was the first year where they could really say, like, we can go compete for a Big 12 title. They weren't really, you know, and coming from North Dakota State, obviously they wanted to win the Big 12, but it's just a process of building the kind of team that you want and, you know, developing the players that you've brought into the program early on, like guys like Deuce Vaughn, who were, you know, just freshmen and now they're juniors, and then your team's probably gonna be better when those guys are juniors and seniors. And so this is the first year they really felt like we've got a shot here. That was a big reason why they went out and got Adrian Martinez from Nebraska, because they felt like he was kind of that one maybe missing piece for them. In addition to making the change with Colin Klein taking over as OC, which has gone great. And so, you know, early in the season, you have some of those moments like Oklahoma. And obviously they lost to Tulane and had to rally from that. But you have the moment against Oklahoma where Martinez plays one of the best games of his career, and you're like, okay, yeah, they're set. They've got the pieces. They're going to be a problem in this Big 12 race. And it's so funny how that TCU game really is a big turning point for their season, because Adrian Martinez obviously goes into that game banged up or whatever and can't play very much. And Will Howard goes in and lights up TCU in the first half there, and, you know, really showed them that he can do this. And it's not, you know, they didn't bring in Adrian Martinez because they didn't think Will Howard could play there. I mean, you know, he certainly has had to start a lot of games over his first 2 years at Kansas State because of the injuries that Skylar Thompson dealt with. But they felt like Martinez gave him something a little bit extra. And I think that it's been really cool to see Will Howard stay there, keep working, keep improving, and then, as you saw in November, really be the kind of that X factor that took them to another level. Obviously, he didn't play in the game against Texas, but I think ever since he got this job, I believe since he's become the full-time starter, or in the games that he started, I think they're averaging 43 points a game now, and I think it's been. I think that K-State's also number 1 in scoring defense now in the Big 12 too. So it's so impressive the way that, you know, usually on paper you look at a team in August and say, okay, this is what they're going to be. But you know, it's just like with TCU, it's kind of an evolution during the season. And I think this K-State team comes in here, you know, clearly being number 10 in the playoff rankings as a 3-loss team tells you, you know, the amount of respect that the committee has for the Big 12 schedule and for what K-State has accomplished. And I think it's going to be a great challenge.
I think if you told everybody in August there'd be a purple team in Arlington, I think everybody would have said, oh, absolutely, K-State can get there. When you tell them it's going to be an all-purple Big 12 championship, people are still
I wish I'd placed a bet on an all-purple Big 12 championship. I think we both would have made a lot of money if we'd done that back in August.
There's a friend of mine on Twitter who put some money down on TCU to win the Big 12 championship, and if that bet cashes Saturday, is going to be
what did he get for that?
I want to say it was like,
it had to be good.
300 something to 1 or 320. I mean, it's
30 to 1, something like that. Yeah, it's got to be. Yeah,
insane bet.
Wow.
So yeah, we're all hoping because that would pay for his playoff excursion.
Yeah, it would for sure.
You know, there's a lot of different ways I could go to follow up here, but the thing that you brought up that really stuck with me is the respect that the committee has for the Big 12 schedule. Well, that's the first time I've heard anybody say that. So I think that we've seen from a TCU perspective, the committee has constantly looked for ways to kind of doubt the Horned Frogs, and not just the committee, but fan bases of other programs. You know, at first it was Tennessee's. Why is TCU's not better than Tennessee? And then now it's Ohio State or potentially a 2-loss Alabama, that if TCU does not take care of business on Saturday and finish that 13-0 run, something that would be the first time that has happened since 2009.
Mm-hmm.
Is there enough respect for what the Horned Frogs have accomplished to this point? Does the committee now believe in the Big 12 enough to say, hey, TCU has proven itself, or do they need to prove themselves one more time?
Yeah, it's so interesting. And I probably should note Kansas State's athletic director, Gene Taylor, is on the playoff committee. So maybe that contributes a little bit to the respect for K-State or hopefully for the Big 12. It's so funny. Like, I feel like if this were Oklahoma, we probably wouldn't be having this conversation. I think probably if it were Oklahoma, or potentially Texas, then you would see the dialogue would be all about, oh, 3 of these have already clinched. It's nothing. I mean, nobody's like sitting here talking about the possibility that Purdue could beat Michigan, right? We're just saying, okay, Michigan's in. They're good. They won their best games, all that. Honestly, I like, from covering the conference for I think probably a decade now, like, and you too, like, going 9-0 in the Big 12 is really freaking hard.
Yeah. And
there's a reason why, like, it pretty much never happens. Like, I think it is that accomplishment. If you respect, like, I understand that the way that a resume gets assessed is based on quality wins, and the teams that you beat, where were they ranked in the final playoff ranking and all that kind of stuff. Certainly TCU has played a lot of teams that were ranked at the time of the game, which I still think is important. But I mean, you just look at this conference, like, there's not a bad coach in the conference at this point. Like, there's not a poorly coached team out there, especially with the way Kansas has turned things around. Like, I think that the difficulty of the Big 12 schedule, you hope that, like, ultimately it commands enough respect. And certainly it's going to depend on if TCU were to lose, it's going to depend on the margin a little bit. And I think if Utah were to beat USC, maybe this is not even that much of a conversation, right? Like, maybe going into Saturday, TCU's feeling pretty safe. I think that part's important as well. But yeah, you really wonder, like, when things get really, like, when that debate is really hot on Saturday night, like, will people be giving TCU enough respect, or how will you compare them to Ohio State or Alabama or whatever? But I think that I've been the person that, like, going into November, I was the person who was like, I think TCU will go 11-1. So, like, what's the one loss going to be? And they just keep winning these games. So it's like, at some point, I'm starting to believe that they are going to go 13-0, and as good as K-State is. And I thought West Virginia could be a trap. I thought Texas Tech could be a trap. I certainly thought Texas could be the game where, you're a little bit worn out here. The fact they haven't had a bye week's catching up to you and stuff. And they went out and beat Texas, and they went out and finished the job. I thought Iowa State might keep it close. Iowa State did not keep it close against TCU. I mean, I thought that
none of us were expecting to have any fun at that Iowa State game. And after the first drive, we were like, oh, this is going to be fun.
Yeah, honestly, I thought that's like a 21-17 stressful kind of game, because Iowa State's defense has been so good. And the only team in the Big 12 that lit up Iowa State's defense this year was TCU. So every step of the way, like,
without Quentin Johnston, with barely
sure.
Kendre Miller, it was completely the most unexpected result of the weekend, and nobody seems to want to talk about it.
Absolutely. And I understand that if you just look at Iowa State's record, then sure, you'd say it doesn't matter. But no, I think that certainly on that side of the ball, I thought they were going to give TCU some problems. And so, yeah, I think the accomplishments really over November have been really impressive to me, and hopefully to the committee, and hopefully it's not that, that really chaotic situation on Saturday night where it's like, oh, they lost by 10. How bad is that? And all this kind of stuff. Because I think the accomplishments up to now, not to mention the fact you're doing it with a first year coach and staff, it's just so impressive. And I don't think that it's like, what, no matter what they do, there's still people still kind of act like, well, they're just kind of getting by. And at that point, that's just not true anymore.
Well, I'm glad to hear you say that, because I think that the PTSD for TCU fans that were around for 2014 right now of looking at the way things are lining up.
How are you going to feel if it's TCU or Ohio State on Saturday night?
It's not great.
Do you think people would just be resigned, like, it's happening again, there's nothing we can do, the bigger brand, all that kind of stuff?
100%, because if you look at you mentioned that we kept expecting TCU to lose. And I think a lot of people from around the program, not inside the program, obviously, but that cover the program were kind of thinking the same thing. And it was almost like you wanted that monkey off your back at some point.
Yeah.
Lose Austin in front of 107,000 people in a close game.
But a quality loss, right?
But
like you would take that.
Loss. Yeah. And then at least you don't have that pressure of having to go undefeated, and it's early enough. You can, if you win out from there, it's fine. Maybe if you win off, you lose another heartbreaker in Waco, maybe there's enough time to make up for it. But yeah, now you're looking at a situation where if TCU doesn't win out, they're probably very much looking at a scenario of Ohio State, who doesn't have that 13th data point, facing off with a 12-1 TCU, who is going to get punished for going to the conference championship game. And yeah, I mean, if TCU doesn't pull off the victory, I think every single person that has ever put on TCU purple in their life is going to be sitting there Saturday night, just, wanting
just
to
drinking, just drinking. Yeah.
I mean, I tweeted last night when it was 3-5 for TCU and Ohio State, I tweeted out that this would be like one of the happiest times for TCU fans, but we're gonna sit there and need a drink and want to crawl into a hole because it's playing out. But all that being said, TCU
and yet it's still like the most magical TCU season you could ever conceive of, right? Like nobody expected this. And it's like, but it's like once you get up to this level, then there's like this pressure and there's this stress that comes with it that kind of strips away the joy of what we're experiencing here.
Yeah, I think for a long time it was kind of that scenario of TCU gets to 3-0 and you're thinking, oh, this was unexpected, and then they wall up Oklahoma and you're thinking, well, this was really unexpected. Then you start to get excited.
But at that point, we're just saying OU's really bad, right? It's not really about how good is TCU.
The TCU was good. OU was really bad, and now we see that OU maybe isn't quite as incompetent as we thought that they were, as they start getting adjusted to Brent Venables' system. But then it comes to a point where you start to get greedy, and you go from, man, like TCU could get to 10 wins, TCU could get to Arlington, TCU could win the Big 12. Oh, and now you want it. Now you want the playoffs. You want the redemption story. You want the 180 from 2014 and the chance to finish the job. And that kind of
greedy is a great way to put it. It's a different mentality. When I'm sure that Sonny Dykes and those guys, I haven't talked to anyone in their step. Like I was at the KU game. Like no one's telling me like we're gonna go win it all this year. They're just trying to get by week to week. You know?
And that segues perfectly into my next question. I mean, when you look at what was being said after that game on Saturday, I was down on the field just taking photos. There was no elation. There was no celebration. Like you could tell that the players were happy, but it was not the culmination of a season at 12-0. It was okay, next box checked. Right. How hard is it? I mean, you've covered programs that have been in this position. You've seen this, time and time again, not just in the Big 12, but on a national scale. How hard is it for these 18 to 23-year-old kids to keep that mindset? And what do you think Sonny Dykes has been able to do to keep the focus on literally the next week?
Yeah, it's really amazing. And I think the way that the schedule set up this year, which you don't really hear people talk about as much, to have their bye week as early as they did, and then to have this run is like, it's unbelievable, because at some point, clearly you need a break. You need a week off. You need time for people to get healthy. You need time.
Oklahoma State fans and the injuries that they've been through playing 9 conference games.
Sure. Yeah, it's really brutal, and you need time to get ready for those next opponents. You need time to heal up. You need time to come, like imagine if they had after the Texas game, for example, like sometimes you just need time to like come down from one of those big wins and kind of reset a little bit. And so to have this kind of marathon run that TCU has had this season is so impressive. And it speaks to, a head coach that, first of all, this is why you hire experienced head coaches, right? Because I think that it is challenging for guys that don't have as much experience in this to kind of push all the right buttons. And Sonny Dykes, certainly he hasn't been in this position before in his coaching career, but you've been in enough places at Louisiana Tech and Cal and, at SMU to kind of understand the pulse of a team and how to kind of manage it. And didn't think you'd be in this situation here in year one, but at the same time, like just to be able to like kind of, guys, all right, chill. We're not as good or as bad as everyone says. We just need to just keep stacking these and just keep getting a little bit better, and really keep having fun as a group, and not make this about the pressure of perfection. I think it speaks, a lot to what Sonny Dykes has done this year, and he should be in these conversations, for coach of the year, just on the basis of pulling this off. And, I think from talking to players and staffers too, I think Kaz Kazadi has made a huge difference too right away for this program. I know when I talked to Sonny Dykes this summer, he had kind of an expectation of what year one and going into year two kind of looked like in terms of of building, kind of where they needed to build in the strength and conditioning side, to kind of get this roster right after the last few years. He felt like Kazkazadi really accelerated that, and they were way ahead of schedule going into fall camp than they expected to be. And I think you see the impact of that this season from a performance standpoint and just being able to be consistent. So it's super impressive. And again, like this is where some of the nuances of that kind of get lost in the larger playoff conversation, because people kind of want to just judge you by your best wins and your quarterback and stuff like that. But I think that certainly the run that this group is on, and to not, to just keep when the games get tight or when you get behind, to just keep, just keep swinging has been so impressive.
Well, and what a perfect scenario for a first-year head coach to have a team that's 12-0 and can still honestly say with no irony, nobody believes in us. Like this is every coach's dream, right?
Yep, that's right.
You brought up quarterbacks, and as we're recording this on Wednesday morning, we still have not gotten the Heisman finalist announcement officially. I think most TCU folks would believe that Max Duggan will be included in that list. But when you talk about these great quarterbacks and you see a team like USC who has won a lot of games, but hadn't really been in this conversation until Caleb Williams had that performance against UCLA and then matched it, against Notre Dame and looked like a Heisman candidate, potentially a Heisman winner, very likely a Heisman winner. But never have I seen in all of my years of following college football, a quarterback that is as beloved as Max Duggan universally, that's put up the numbers that he has put up, but his team is still not given the type of credit that maybe other quarterbacks at not even bigger programs. If you look at, Desmond Ridder, Grayson McCall, like those guys got a little bit more respect for their playing of the quarterback. Max gets all the respect in the world for the person that he is. But what can you say about him in comparison to CJ Stroud and Caleb Williams and Stetson Bennett as far as his performance on the field?
Yeah, I looked at this on Saturday night, and argued in our Saturday takeaways piece we do every week that I think Max Duggan absolutely belongs in that conversation and should go to New York. And I think certainly this performance this weekend is the chance to really cement that. The stats aren't better than Caleb Williams and CJ Stroud, but they're on that level. I think so. And I think when you include passing and rushing, obviously we know what Max can bring in the run game too. And Caleb Williams has run the ball really well this year, obviously. But, I think if you're just like, sometimes it can get bogged into, it can kind of boil down for people into, Heisman moments and stats. And that's kind of as simple as it is. And what Caleb Williams has done is super impressive. But, certainly I think the season that Max Duggan has had, the consistency that he's played with, and for him to just completely kind of take his game to a whole another level here as a senior has been really fun to watch. And I think that that's a kid that is because he's got such a humble personality and doesn't make it all about him, it's easy to maybe get overlooked a little bit and maybe take for granted what he's doing. But this has been a really, special team. I talked to a staffer at Iowa State last night who was like, that's the best looking football team we've seen in years, like since they came into the conference, and they were raving about the receivers and just some of the talent level. Like, this is a very talented team. I understand that like people can look at, look at Georgia or Michigan or whatever and say like TCU doesn't compare in recruiting rankings and stuff, but this is a really good looking team Max Duggan has around him. And he's done an awesome job of leading it and, managing all these situations we talked about that this team has gone through. And I think that, this game will go a long way towards, like, I always kind of like, I think the Heisman process itself is a little bit frustrating. Like, I wish people voted for a top 5. I wish that they invited like as many players as possible to New York. I think they only invited like 3 last year, which was baffling to me. So I think Max Duggan will finish in the top 5. I think he will. But certainly I think a game like this will help kind of cement, are you a guy that can finish in the top 3 or maybe at the top here? And do you get invited to New York? I think this conference championship game is going to really make the difference.
I think that you talked about, the talent of this team. And one thing that gets overlooked as you compare recruiting rankings and blue chip ratio is that TCU returned 82% of their production on both the offense and defensive side of the ball. And earlier you mentioned the development when you talked about Kansas State. Well, it's kind of peaking. You brought everybody back. You've got a very veteran group across every key position. You've got an experienced quarterback in his fourth year as mostly a starter. You've got a running back who has played on, at some really important games and is got just the right amount of tread on his tire left to be veteran, but still fresh. And then that receiving core, with Quentin Johnston, who looks like he's going to be fully healthy for the Big 12 championship game, which is a big deal. Tay Barber, I think, was held out mostly for old man reasons because the dude's like 37. And then Darius Davis getting back to full strength too. It seems like potentially TCU is peaking at the right time. As you look at this matchup specifically, what are some of the things that you're going to be paying attention to on the field? Where does TCU have an advantage or a disadvantage? I know most people after the first game when Julius Brents was hurt, that Julius Brents Quentin Johnston matchup is going to be high on the list of probably NFL scouts as far as watching, but there's a lot of really intriguing matchups across the field.
Certainly, it was funny. I remember talking to someone at Kansas State after the TCU game who said they've never seen that many injuries in one game, basically, that K-State was working through. Not to make excuses, but they were just like, that was like bizarre how many of their guys were coming out of the game and dealing with something, including obviously some of their best players like Martinez and Vaughn and Anadike Azoma. So I think K-State, I'm curious to see how much of a difference that makes. Can K-State come into this healthy? I think certainly the chess match between Joe Gillespie and Colin Klein is going to be really interesting to watch. I've been impressed by the progress that TCU has been able to make. And you kind of figured with the transition that Gillespie was trying to pull off this year, that they were going to probably play better in November than they were in September, because, you're asking players to do something different than they were always used to under Gary Patterson. And you've got to kind of figure out the D-line pieces that make that work. Certainly they've got great linebacker play this year and you trust the secondary, but I think that, certainly that group and the way that they've endured in Big 12 play and improved, I think is impressive. And K-State, as you saw in their ability to put up points pretty quickly, they can hit you with a lot of different stuff. I mean, they've got some solid playmakers on the outside. Deuce Vaughn, just one of the best players in the country, period. Regardless of weight and size and all that. And I think that obviously in the games that K-State has lost this year, people have contained him. But I think that Will Howard and the power with Sanat and some of the guys that they're able to do, they're able to move pieces around and be a really physical football team when they want to as well. I think it presents some really interesting challenges for this TCU defense. Again, you saw certainly in the second half of that game how they handled that, and were able to get takeaways and able to force K-State to change quarterbacks and all that. So I think you saw them figure it out and respond in the second half of that last matchup. But I think that part's really important, and I think that maybe that side of the game is going to decide things a little bit more. We know how great the TCU offense versus the K-State defense is going to be. And certainly, as you said, if you can have all of those really important players healthy, then it's going to be a heck of a battle. But I'm curious to see how Gillespie handles the other side of that matchup.
Yeah, I think that one of the encouraging things from a TCU side is watching the game plan that Joe Gillespie had for Bijan Robinson. Obviously, him and Deuce Vaughn are different players, but they're also similar players in what the dynamic things that they bring to an offense. And the linebackers really stepped up. I think that linebackers in space against very shifty, quick running backs for TCU has been a big issue this year. Baylor took great advantage of that on their opening couple of drives a couple weeks ago. But what they showed that they can,
and there's going to be some of that. I think what some of the stuff that Baylor was able to do, and certainly they, as they talked about afterwards, and they mess with your keys, they move guys around, they love misdirection and stuff. K-State will definitely try to do some of that for sure.
Yeah. And I think that's where there's a big advantage. And then also, the TCU offensive line has struggled at times. And you mentioned Felix Anaduke Zoma. I think I got that close. And the rest of that defensive front for Kansas State has been so good and so dynamic. Max has been exceptional under pressure for the most part. But it's going to be a tough day for him if he's, kind of having to not be able to get through his reads, not be able to do some of the longer routes and the different things that have made TCU so effective when Quentin Johnston is on the field.
Yeah, you think back to the Texas game, and as those TFLs were piling up early in that game, you're like, man, it's just going to be hard to move the ball. And so that's how the TCU O-line responds to the pressure that Anadike Azoma, who's one of the best pass rushers in the Big 12 in the country, he in that front, that's going to be a big challenge in terms of managing the timing and of the offense and staying on schedule.
One other thing too that I noticed against Iowa State, who doesn't, I mean, they have great defensive linemen. They don't get a ton of sacks, but the difference in not having to keep a tight end in to help chip and being able to use those tight ends in the passing game, I mean, that's what really opened up the game for TCU against the Cyclones. And so I think that that's going to be another issue. Can you use Dracarius Spivey and Jared Wiley in the passing game, or are they going to have to stay in to max protect? And if that becomes the issue, it takes away one of the dynamic elements. Of course, you get QJ back, so maybe that balances. You know, you mentioned Deuce Vaughn, and anybody that loves college football, you know, you have to love watching that guy play. He's another great story. He's just an incredible dynamic player, just both running the ball and coming out of the backfield. TCU fans have nightmares about him on the wheel route because he's burned TCU in every game that he's played against them doing that. But, you know, that brings me to the other side. You know, Bijan Robinson, Deuce Vaughn, they get so much attention, and rightfully so. Just two of the best running backs to come out of the Big 12 in a conference full of them. But Kendrick Miller's pretty good too. And it feels like, despite the fact he's now got, I think, 13 straight games of scoring a touchdown, that he's closing in on some of LaDainian Tomlinson's records, doesn't seem to get kind of that national attention. What do you think that Kendre Miller brings to this offense, and maybe his professional prospects? Because not a lot of people are talking about him as potentially an early round draftee as well.
Yeah, it's so funny. You might not remember this. It's been exactly like a year ago when everyone was freaking out about Zach Evans leaving, right? And that's the end of the world, that Zach Evans is leaving. And he had a good year at Ole Miss. Certainly he got the freshman Quinshon Judkins kind of outshined him there. But yeah, you would think that, like, oh no, Zach Evans is gone, we're screwed. And that's just not been the case. And obviously I think you think back to last season, and it was a tough season, but certainly the fact that Zach Evans was hurt really opened the door for Kendre Miller to do some really good things. And I was really encouraged by what I saw from him last season, and felt like they've got a pretty good player to build that run game around. He's taken it to another level with this group. I think Garrett Riley's done an awesome job of scheming things up for him. And he's just kind of the full package. He's a really talented back. You certainly saw, like in the Texas game, there's that ability for the explosive run down the sideline when he gets a little bit of space, and he can really get going. The speed when he's been able to hit big stuff has been really impressive. But really physical, really a guy that you really count on if you're in a short yardage situation. He's just a really talented back, and I from talking to the staff this summer, I knew they really liked him, and I'm not surprised that that he would really make a lot of sense in their offense. But he's been an all Big 12 player for sure, and a guy that I think is going to be a handful for Kansas State.
Who would have thought that Amari DiMercato and Kendre Miller would be a better 1-2 punch than Zach Evans and Kendre Miller coming into this? And Amari DiMercato probably deserves a lot more love and attention that he gets as well. He's been really solid. Before we get into kind of your final thoughts on this matchup, I want to ask you kind of big picture stuff. Garrett Riley is a finalist for the Broyles Award. Joe Gillespie, I think, is getting a lot of respect on the defensive side of the ball. Both of those guys at Tulsa just opened up. Both of those guys are probably going to be on short lists for head coaching jobs, if not this year, in the near future. Are you hearing any buzz about either of those guys for some of these open positions? Cincinnati's open now as well, or do you think that TCU is going to have an opportunity in Sonny Dykes to keep his staff together past this run, and is making the playoffs maybe the key in doing so?
Yeah, it's really interesting. It reminds me a little bit of the situation last year at Oklahoma State, where Jim Knowles really had an unbelievable year and was a Broyles finalist. I remember talking with their AD Chad Weiberg after the Big 12 title game and saying, we're going to do everything we can to keep him. And then Ohio State comes in and hires him the next day and makes him, the highest paid assistant in Ohio State history and all that. It can be challenging when, like, you take Garrett Riley, like, what if Alabama calls? What if Texas A&M calls? What if all these, these schools that these really high profile OC openings potentially, you would have to give him a call just based on what he's done this year. And so I'm sure Garrett Riley's going to get a lot of calls. And this is one of those situations where I think if you're Sonny Dykes and Jeremiah Donati, obviously you're going to try and do everything you can to take care of the staff and hold them together. And I think this is when you have the momentum of a season like this. And I can't imagine what the season like this does for fundraising and for what they've been able to do this, these past few months here in terms of getting boosters and everybody on behind you and with you. Like, this is that's kind of a big, obviously there's great opportunities out there for a guy like Garrett Riley or for Joe Gillespie. And this would be, to be able to hold on to those kind of guys and pay them what it would probably take to keep the great coaches on your staff. It's probably going to be a challenge and something that will tell you a lot about, kind of can TCU capitalize on a season like this and, take care of these people. That's one of the burdens of being this successful is people look at your staff and say, how do we get some of that on our staff? And so, I think the thing is that these guys love working for Sonny Dykes. I mean, there's no doubt about that. And so I'm sure that nobody wants to leave, but yeah, I imagine when you're this successful, you're gonna get a lot of calls, and you hope that TCU and Donati can put the money in the offers together to keep them.
But with no real insider information, I'm of the belief that this contract renegotiation that's happening between Donati and Sonny Dykes is less about Sonny Dykes getting a raise and more about making sure that there's an assistant pool that can keep those guys around. And I think you talk about loving working for Sonny Dykes. He seems to be very family focused. There's lots of kids around the offices. He lets his coaches have lives. And it's obvious now, I think to this point, to anyone that follows college football, TCU certainly has the resources to compete at this level. And so you have to wonder that quality of life of, do you want to deal with the pressure cooker of Fort Worth versus the pressure cooker of College Station or Austin? Maybe a lateral move at this point isn't, that enticing if you can make the money match.
Sure. And as you said, I think a lot of times, especially the coaches like Sonny Dykes, when you're in these situations where you have this kind of leverage, a lot of times it is about taking care of your people. It's not about to Sonny Dykes. I can't imagine it's important to him that he is paid, Nick Saban money or Dabo Swinney money or anything like that. I think it's about taking care of the people, continuing to invest in this football program, and really seizing on this opportunity that TCU has. Really, when you think about the next 5 years here of, can we be the premier program in the Big 12? Like, I think an offseason like this is really important in terms of the investment into football and taking a run like this and really building on it.
Yeah, I think so. One other coaching question, tangentially related to what's going on. Gary Patterson, a little smoke around the UNLV opening. Have you heard anything about that? What do you think the odds are that he is a head coach at a football program again next season?
So you've heard that too. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I think it's interesting. Certainly Gary Patterson's name came up in connection to the Nebraska job. I'm sure that was a job that he probably coveted in terms of his connections in the Midwest and stuff. I think he's in a really interesting position now in his career. I'm sure that it was refreshing to have a little bit of a lighter role here at Texas and helping out with the defense and everything like that. And I'm sure if you're Gary Patterson, you want to go out and go prove yourself all over again. And but when you look at the landscape here, what's the right kind of move, right? Like, is it going to a place like UNLV and saying, I'm going to go out here and try to dominate the Mountain West? Like, I certainly wouldn't doubt that. Right. He's done it before, right? I wouldn't put it past him to be successful in one of those kind of jobs. Or do you want to be, this really high paid DC somewhere? I think the next step for Gary Patterson's career is going to be very interesting, but I have no doubt that after a year like this and probably the success of TC probably motivates you a little bit to get out there and prove what you can do all over again.
For sure. All right. So before we let you go, final thoughts on Saturday's matchup. Do you have a good feeling one way or the other about who's going to win? And what do you think is going to be kind of the number one key to who comes out on top against Kansas State and TCU?
I think at this point, I'm going to still say I think TCU wins. I think you will be very stressed out, probably.
Oh, for sure. Absolutely.
Yeah. I think it's going to be a stressful close game.
Nothing's going to be in focus. It's fine. I'm okay with that.
I mean, you think about, so the standard last year is that the team lost by an inch, right? So like, I'm not saying it's going to be exactly that close, but I do think it's going to be a 4-quarter game. I really do. And I think that I could see TCU really rising to this moment and putting together one of their best performances. It is hard to beat a team twice. I think K-State has improved and gotten healthy, and I think they're a little bit different team than when these teams played. How many weeks ago was that? Was that about a month ago or
about 6 weeks ago? I think. Yeah.
6 weeks ago. Yeah.
That was in October.
I think K-State's gotten better since then. I think they're going to present some real challenges. But I think TCU's ready for this. I think the experience at the quarterback position gives TCU an advantage in this game. Although I guess, I suppose Adrian Martinez could pop into this game and make some plays. We can't rule it out. I guess either team feels pretty good if the backup has to go in, right?
Yeah.
You can't say that very often.
Experienced guys behind.
Well, and you think about last year's Big 12 title game, and obviously the big difference was Jalen Warren couldn't play that game, and Oklahoma State didn't have a run game and couldn't be their best self. And I think both of these teams kind of come in. There's not that one big question mark of is the guy ready to go? And there's also, these teams are both pretty balanced enough that, like, I mean, certainly, like, if you take Deuce Vaughn out of this game, K-State is going to have a harder time moving the ball and stuff. But, like, these are teams that are not one dimensional necessarily. And so I think that I think it's going to be a fascinating game, and one where TCU can really go out and, you would think, earn that respect from people, right? But maybe you just can't assume that anymore and just say, hey, all we can do is just keep the 0 in the loss column, and then they have no choice but to put us in. I think TCU will get it done. And I think I think TCU will make the playoff, and I'm with you in hoping that we're not sweating this thing out on Saturday night.
Yeah, you and me both, my friend. You and me both. Where can people find your work, Max?
Theathletic.com. Tons of coverage of everything that's going on right now. Lots to keep up with in college football. But hopefully, if people haven't checked out The Athletic and our college football coverage and World Cup and everything else, I hope you do. And then you can follow me on Twitter, Max_Olson.
Yeah, and I think The Athletic obviously is some of the best sports writing, if not the best sports writing that you can find nationally. And you know what? When TCU's good, there's lots of TCU content. I know it's always the complaint. Everybody forgets about us, but when you're, 5-7, nobody cares. Now you can find all kinds of great stuff from you, from Sam.
We've been in a lot of TCU games this year. That is true. We've been all over it.
We've been all over it. So thank you so much for joining us, Max. Really appreciate your time and your insights.
Yeah, thanks, Melissa.